Crystal glasses clinked as Olivia poured herself another round of Chateau Margaux. Our penthouse on the Upper East Side gleamed under designer lighting, the Manhattan skyline a glittering tapestry through floor-to-ceiling windows. 27 floors up, we were literally above the world, exactly how she liked it. I watched her manicured hand lift the glass to her lips, her diamond wedding ring catching the light in a prismatic dance that once would have mesmerized me. "You're unusually quiet tonight, Evan," she said, not bothering to look at me. "Still upset about the Johnson deal?" I thought we had moved beyond that particular disappointment. I wasn't upset about the Johnson deal. That potential investor I'd brought to the table for Stenton Financial Group had been dismissed by Olivia in front of the entire board as another one of Evan's charity cases 2 weeks ago. The investor had walked out, taking his $200 million elsewhere. That humiliation had merely been the most recent in a 6-year marriage built on systematic degradation disguised as love. "I'm not upset about Johnson," I said, my voice steady. "I've been thinking about our relationship and what it has become over these years." She finally turned her head, amused by my serious tone. Dangerous territory for someone with your limited emotional vocabulary. Her designer dress, Oscar de la Renta, $12,000, purchased with my credit card, rustled as she shifted on our Italian leather sofa. "Remember what happened the last time you attempted deep introspection?" Last time, my proposal for a blockchain-based investment platform that would democratize wealth management for middle-class Americans. She laughed it out of existence at our dinner party, then presented a watered-down version to her father as her own brainchild 3 months later. The patent now bore the Stenton name, not Carter. "I want a divorce," I said, the words hanging in our temperature-controlled air like unwelcome intruders. The smile froze on her face. Then it widened, becoming something predatory and calculating, an expression I had seen countless times when she sensed weakness in business opponents. "A divorce?" She set down her wine glass with theatrical precision. "That's absolutely adorable, Evan. And what exactly do you plan to do afterward? Where will you go without connections? How will you survive without the Stenton infrastructure supporting your mediocre talents?" I'd prepared for this response through 6 months of secret planning, of carefully moving digital assets into anonymous accounts, of securing a small apartment in Brooklyn under an LLC that couldn't be traced back to me. Not enough to live in luxury, but enough to start over without begging on the street as she clearly expected. "I'll manage on my own terms, without your constant reminders of my supposed inadequacies," I responded, maintaining eye contact despite the desire to look away from her piercing gaze. She laughed, the sound bouncing off our marble countertops like breaking glass. "Manage? You've never successfully managed anything in your life without my guidance. Who introduced you to every important contact you have? Who secured your VP position at Stenton through family influence? Who ensures you don't embarrass yourself at galas by wearing last season's styles?" She stood up with fluid grace, crossing to where I sat with deliberate steps that had intimidated countless business rivals. Her perfume, Clive Christian, $2,000 per bottle, another extravagant gift from me she treated as her entitlement, enveloped me as she leaned down into my personal space. "Without me, you're nothing but a community college finance graduate from nowhere, Pennsylvania. Without my money and connections, you'll disappear into obscurity within a week. You can't even operate the espresso machine without calling the housekeeper for assistance." The last part wasn't remotely true. I'd been making my own coffee for months now, part of my preparation for independence. Small acts of self-sufficiency that she never noticed because she never really saw me as anything more than an accessory to her carefully curated life. I rose from my chair with deliberate slowness, went to the entry table, and pulled out my wallet. From it, I extracted the Black American Express card with her family name embossed on it. I placed it on our marble dining table without ceremony. Next came the keys to the Mercedes she'd given me for my birthday. A gift she never let me forget was really hers. Finally, I removed the Patek Philippe watch from my wrist, her wedding gift to me, which she'd selected primarily so other wives would notice and comment on her generosity. "I don't need these symbols of dependency anymore," I stated with finality. Her confidence faltered for the first time in our entire relationship. "Don't be unnecessarily dramatic. Where exactly will you go? Back to Pittsburgh to manage your parents' failed hardware store? She smirked, recovering her poise quickly. Oh, wait, they lost that pathetic business in the recession, didn't they? How unfortunate. That was the moment I knew beyond any doubt that I was making the right decision. The casual cruelty, the way she weaponized my family's financial struggles without any empathy. I'd spent years trying to help my parents rebuild after 2008 wiped them out, and Olivia had always viewed that commitment as an amusing character flaw rather than a sign of loyalty. Goodbye, Olivia. I wish you well with whoever becomes your next project. I walked toward the door, where I'd already stashed a go-bag weeks earlier in anticipation of this moment. You won't last a month in the real world, she called after me, her voice rising with genuine anger. When you're sleeping in your car because reality hits, don't call me for rescue. I turned back one last time, memorizing the image of her standing there, beautiful and terrible, surrounded by all the luxury money could buy, but devoid of anything real. I won't call you under any circumstances. And contrary to your predictions, I won't be sleeping in my car or coming back begging for forgiveness. Without me supporting your mediocre talents, you're absolutely nothing. Her voice rose an octave, that perfect socialite composure cracking for the first time since I'd known her. Do you hear me, Evan? You are nothing without the Stenton name attached to yours. I closed the door quietly behind me, cutting off her increasingly desperate pronouncements. In the private elevator down to the lobby, I released a breath I felt like I'd been holding for 6 years of calculated humiliation. My phone buzzed repeatedly. Olivia, no doubt, already switching to damage control mode. I turned it off and removed the SIM card, dropping it into the elevator's trash receptacle. The new phone with a new number was already in my bag. As I walked through the marble-floored lobby, the doorman nodded respectfully. Good evening, Mr. Carter. Should I call for your vehicle? Good evening, Jose. That won't be necessary tonight. Take care of yourself and your family, I responded with genuine warmth. He looked momentarily surprised at the sincere sentiment, another indication of how Olivia's world operated. People were decorative furniture until they became useful, then they were disposable tools. Outside, instead of having the valet bring around my Mercedes, I walked to the curb and hailed a taxi. The driver, a middle-aged man with graying temples, glanced at my expensive suit with understandable suspicion. Brooklyn Heights, I told him, my destination deliberately chosen far from Olivia's social circles. Avenue A, please. As we pulled away from the gleaming tower that had been my gilded prison, I didn't look back even once. The Manhattan skyline receded in the rear window, and with each passing block, I felt myself becoming someone new. Or perhaps someone old, someone I'd been before Olivia Stenton decided to make me her trophy husband. The tiny studio apartment I'd secretly rented was admittedly a shock to the system after years of palatial living spaces. 700 square feet, with exposed brick, worn hardwood floors, and a kitchenette barely big enough for one person to turn around in. But it was entirely mine, paid for in cash for 6 months up front with funds I'd been quietly siphoning from my personal accounts. I set my bag down and surveyed what would now be home. A desk by the window would become my new office. The mattress on the floor would serve as my bed until I could afford a proper frame. The single chair and folding table would function as my dining room for the foreseeable future. Well, I said to the empty room, feeling more excitement than despair, this is where we start building something authentic. 3 weeks later, I was nursing a cup of coffee in a small cafe in Soho, my laptop open to a business plan I'd been refining continuously since 3 a.m. Sleep had become a luxury I could no longer afford when competing against Stenton resources. My seed money, carefully hidden from Olivia during our marriage by converting small amounts of my bonuses to cryptocurrency, would only last another 4 months at my current burn rate without additional investment. The cafe door chimed and I glanced up automatically. A woman in her late 50s entered, her silver-streaked brown hair pulled back in a practical bun. Something about her seemed vaguely familiar, but I couldn't immediately place her within my mental Rolodex. She ordered at the counter, then turned and scanned the room with practiced efficiency. Her eyes locked with mine, and recognition dawned on her face. She approached my table with deliberate steps, that suggested both caution and determination. Evan Carter, I thought that might be you behind all that focused concentration. I tensed instinctively. Had Olivia sent someone to locate me? I'd been meticulously careful to stay off social media and use only untraceable payment methods. I'm Clara Miller, she said, correctly reading my wariness. I served as your wife's executive assistant for 11 years at Stenton Financial, until last month when my services were abruptly terminated. Memory clicked into place. Clara had been a fixture at Stenton Financial, always operating efficiently in the background during company events, managing Olivia's chaotic schedule and impossible demands. She'd always treated me with professional courtesy in the distant way of someone who couldn't afford to make either allies or enemies. May I join you for a moment? She asked, gesturing to the empty chair across from me. I nodded, closing my laptop protectively. You're not with Stenton Financial anymore? That seems unexpected considering your institutional knowledge. A tight smile creased her face. Let's just say my services were no longer required after I questioned certain accounting practices involving the Stenton Foundation's reported community investments versus their actual disbursements. The Stenton Foundation, Olivia's supposedly philanthropic project, dedicated to financial education for underprivileged communities. I'd harbored suspicions about its operations for years, but whenever I raised questions, Olivia immediately shut down any discussion with remarkable hostility. What specific accounting practices prompted your termination? I asked carefully, keeping my voice neutral. Clara glanced around with practiced discretion, then leaned forward. The kind that transforms charitable donations into private operational funds. The kind that reports construction of 10 community centers when only 3 physically exist. The kind that would immediately interest federal regulators if they received proper documentation. My pulse quickened with vindication. And you possess concrete proof of these discrepancies? She patted her handbag with quiet confidence. 6 years of meticulously compiled documentation. Internal emails, unauthorized fund transfers, geolocation-tagged photographs of non-existent facilities being used to secure significant tax advantages. She studied me with shrewd assessment. I've been observing you for years, Evan. You're fundamentally different from the Stenton organization in ways they never appreciated. How exactly did you manage to find me? I asked, professional paranoia overriding curiosity. My cousin works for the Commercial Property Registry Office. When a new company called Iron Core Holdings leased space in this neighborhood with you listed as the principal, I decided to investigate the connection. She tilted her head slightly. The name Iron Core carries significance beyond corporate anonymity. Would you mind sharing its origin? I hadn't revealed the name's personal significance to anyone, but something about Clara's directness invited reciprocal honesty. When I was growing up, my father had this motivational saying whenever our family faced challenges, Carter men have iron in their core. After he lost everything in 2008, that mantra disappeared from his vocabulary. I want to eventually remind him of his own strength through my example. Clara nodded with genuine understanding. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out an unmarked USB drive, sliding it across the table with deliberate precision. Everything you need is contained here. Sufficient evidence to completely dismantle Senator Stenton's carefully constructed public persona and his daughter's inheritance. Her eyes, sharp and clear, met mine without wavering. I'm not offering this for personal vengeance. I'm providing it because justice demands accountability. Those community centers were intended to help struggling families access financial literacy programs that never materialized. I stared at the small device that potentially contained nuclear-level information. Why approach me specifically? Why not proceed directly through proper regulatory channels? The Stentons maintain controlling influence over half the judges in New York and have strategically placed former employees throughout every relevant regulatory agency. I attempted reporting through official protocols. My carefully documented evidence mysteriously disappeared, and suddenly I found myself under investigation for alleged embezzlement. Her mouth twisted with bitter experience. They're too powerful and connected for direct confrontation. But they consistently underestimated because of their fundamental arrogance. I picked up the drive, considering its implications. What exactly are you seeking in exchange for this extraordinary intelligence? Employment, she said without pretense. I excel at organizational management, and I currently have nowhere else to apply those skills. The Stentons ensured my professional blacklisting throughout the financial sector. I evaluated her proposition with pragmatic consideration. Having someone with Clara's insider knowledge would provide invaluable strategic advantage. But my fledgling operation barely generated sufficient revenue to sustain one person, let alone an additional employee. I can't offer competitive compensation initially, I warned. My resources remain severely constrained during this startup phase. I didn't request substantial compensation, she replied pragmatically. I asked for meaningful employment with potential for future growth. I extended my hand with newfound resolve. Welcome to Ironcore Holdings, Clara. Let's build something worthwhile together. Her handshake conveyed firm commitment, her first genuine smile transforming her expression. What exactly does Ironcore intend to accomplish in the marketplace? I reopened my laptop and turned it toward her. We're developing a platform to democratize investment opportunities for middle-class Americans. And we're going to leverage the Stenton Foundation's legitimate connections while exposing their illegitimate operations. The subsequent 6 months brought unprecedented challenges. Clara and I operated from my cramped apartment, working in alternating shifts because the space couldn't accommodate 2 workstations simultaneously. I handled programming during daylight hours. She maintained her extensive professional network connections during evenings. We subsisted primarily on instant noodles and unwavering determination to succeed against overwhelming odds. The USB drive contained sufficient evidence to completely destroy the Stentons multiple times over, but strategic timing remained crucial. Ammunition maintains value only when properly deployed from an appropriate weapon, Clara reminded me whenever impatience threatened my judgment. We needed to establish Ironcore as a substantive entity first before confronting such powerful adversaries. I methodically contacted former university colleagues who had pursued technological careers instead of finance. People without connections to Olivia's insular world of inherited privilege. With promises of equity, participation, and a vision of disrupting entrenched financial elites, I assembled a small team of motivated programmers and analytical specialists willing to work for future compensation. Our initial breakthrough emerged when we identified a recurring pattern within the Stenton Foundation's investment portfolio. They systematically established short positions against specific companies immediately before negative press conveniently appeared about those businesses. Companies that had notably refused Senator Stenton's aggressive partnership proposals during preceding quarters. This represents blatant market manipulation, Clara confirmed after analyzing the timing correlations. They're misappropriating the foundation's charitable resources to penalize businesses that resist the senator's personal financial interests. Can we definitively prove the connection beyond circumstantial correlation? I asked, maintaining evidentiary standards. We can implement something far more effective than retrospective proof, she responded, strategic intelligence evident in her expression. We can accurately predict their next targets. Utilizing the patterns we'd identified through data analysis, we established counter-trading positions, small distributed transactions that wouldn't trigger institutional attention. When the Stentons established short positions against vulnerable companies, we established corresponding long positions, then anonymously alerted the targeted businesses about impending negative media coverage. When properly forewarned, these companies implemented effective counter-messaging strategies. Their stock values maintained stability rather than experiencing expected declines. Our positions generated modest returns while the Stentons' manipulative strategies underperformed. These operations didn't generate transformative wealth, but they provided the essential operational capital. We relocated from my apartment into modest commercial space in an emerging Brooklyn neighborhood. We hired 3 additional team members with complementary skills. We accelerated platform development with increased resources. Throughout this period, I maintained strategic awareness of Olivia's movements through business publications rather than personal interest. As anticipated, she immediately initiated divorce proceedings, demanding substantial alimony despite her considerable independent wealth, claiming abandonment without justification. What she failed to anticipate was my counterfiling with comprehensive evidence of her multiple documented affairs during our marriage, recorded by a private investigator I'd retained during my final year with her, another strategic investment in future independence. Her legal representatives contacted mine with unexpected urgency, suddenly eager to conclude proceedings rapidly without public disclosure. I accepted straightforward separation, no ongoing financial obligations in either direction, equitable division of minimal joint assets. The prenuptial agreement she had insisted upon, ironically, protected my separate holdings, including Ironcore's emerging potential. 7 months after departing from that penthouse confrontation, I received a cryptic text message from an unrecognized number. CNBC breaking announcement. Immediate viewing recommended. It was Clara, always monitoring relevant information channels. I quickly located a financial news live stream on my laptop, connecting just in time to witness the official announcement. Stenton Financial Group was launching Stent Invest, described as an innovative platform bringing sophisticated investment opportunities to everyday Americans. My platform, my original concept. Even the user interface resembled our developmental wireframes with minimal alterations. My phone immediately rang. Clara again. They have blatantly stolen your intellectual property, she stated without preamble. They must have compromised our network security. No infiltration necessary, I replied, watching Olivia smile confidently for cameras, her father's proprietary hand resting on her shoulder. They simply appropriated the foundation I developed while legally married to Olivia. They maintained access to my preliminary designs. How do we possibly compete against their established resources and market dominance? She asked with uncharacteristic concern. I observed Senator Stenton discussing financial inclusivity with practiced insincerity that fooled media representatives. We don't engage in direct competition against their resources. We implement strategic differentiation. Toward what alternative positioning? The singular element they fundamentally cannot offer within their business model, I explained as the strategy crystallized. Authentic transparency. Ironcore Transparency launched 3 months later. Rather than attempting to establish another generic investment platform, we positioned ourselves as independent accountability specialists for the investment industry. Our proprietary system analyzed obscured fee structures, undisclosed conflicts of interest, and historically adjusted performance metrics of various investment products, providing consumers with unprecedented clarity regarding their financial decisions. We initiated operations with a comprehensive analysis of Stent Invest's supposedly revolutionary products and services. Our published report produced devastating market impact. We methodically revealed how their innovative fee structure actually incorporated multiple hidden charges, how their democratized investment options channeled capital primarily into Senator Stenton's affiliated business interests, and how their transparent performance reporting systematically obscured relevant risk metrics from consumer evaluation. We deliberately avoided explicit connection to the Stenton Foundation's questionable charitable activities, reserving that evidence for appropriate timing, but incorporated sufficient suggestive elements that investigative financial journalists began pursuing uncomfortable questions independently. Stent Invest's launch momentum collapsed abruptly. Olivia found herself conducting damage control across financial news networks, where her practice charm appeared increasingly evasive when confronted with specific technical challenges to her product's fundamental integrity. One evening, as I departed our expanding office space in a renovated warehouse district, a black SUV with darkened windows pulled alongside the curb. The rear window descended to reveal Olivia, appearing immaculately composed despite visible stress indicators around her eyes. "Please join me briefly," she stated with attempted authority. "We have matters requiring immediate discussion." "We have nothing requiring mutual consultation," I responded, continuing my departure without breaking stride. She instructed her driver to pace my movement along the curb. "Stop behaving childishly, Evan. This vindictive project of yours must conclude immediately before causing further market disruption." I halted deliberately and turned toward her. "Vindictive? You genuinely believe this entire enterprise revolves around you personally? Obviously, everything you've accomplished has been motivated by our relationship," she snapped with characteristic narcissism. "I fundamentally created your professional existence, remember? The former version of myself would have reflexively apologized for her displeasure, would have experienced that familiar sensation of inadequacy. But that person no longer existed after months of rebuilding authentic self-perception. That represents our fundamental difference, Olivia. You've consistently assumed everything revolves around your presence. I've successfully moved beyond that distorted perspective. Her carefully maintained composure visibly deteriorated. Moved beyond to what exactly? An insignificant startup operating from warehouse space? Playing financial vigilante without understanding potential consequences? Do you comprehend who you're challenging with these amateur tactics? With considerably greater clarity than you apparently realize, I responded with newfound confidence. My father meets with the Senate Banking Committee next week regarding regulatory proposals. One recommendation from him, and your operation faces comprehensive federal investigation. Is that your preferred outcome? I leaned closer, establishing direct eye contact without flinching. Please advise your father to exercise extreme caution regarding his regulatory recommendations. Individuals occupying glass structures should avoid projectile behaviors. For the first time in our relationship, genuine apprehension flashed across her expression. She recognized fundamental change, but couldn't identify its specific nature or implications. What precisely does that cryptic warning signify? She demanded with diminished authority. It means I'm no longer the accommodating husband who departed your penthouse. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have substantive responsibilities requiring attention. I resumed walking, her increasingly agitated voice following me. This situation remains unresolved, Evan. I continued forward without acknowledging her threat. The confrontation wasn't concluded, but resolution was becoming increasingly visible on the horizon. The following week, we received formal legal notification. Stenton Financial Group initiated litigation against Iron Core for alleged defamation, corporate espionage, and numerous secondary complaints. They demanded immediate retraction of our published analysis, cessation of all operations, and payment of $50 million in compensatory damages. Our limited legal resources appeared immediately overwhelmed by the barrage. Potential investors who had expressed interest in our growing operation suddenly withdrew from discussions. 2 employees resigned, expressing concern about career implications of challenging such powerful opponents. They're implementing standard litigation warfare, Clara observed as we reviewed case documentation in my office. Overwhelming with procedural requirements that generate prohibitive legal expenses. Classic Stenton methodology. They don't require judicial victory if they can achieve financial depletion first. I nodded, studying the complaint's specific language. Notice their careful avoidance of contesting our factual findings. They're exclusively claiming improper information acquisition methods. Because our analysis remains factually irrefutable, she confirmed. Unfortunately, judicial accuracy may prove irrelevant against their 20-attorney legal department compared to our 2-person representation. I stood and approached the window, observing the Brooklyn skyline with Manhattan's towers gleaming across the water in afternoon light. Perhaps we should consider comprehensive disclosure, I suggested, after consideration. Not limited to our analysis findings, but including everything. The foundation improprieties, the market manipulation evidence. Complete transparency. Clara's expression registered immediate concern. That represents our absolute last resort option, Evan. Once implemented, retraction becomes impossible. The Stentons will deploy every available resource against us without restraint. They're already implementing maximum pressure tactics, I observed pragmatically. We're currently operating defensively from disadvantageous positioning. Strategic initiative requires decisive action. She remained contemplative before finally nodding with resolution. I'll organize comprehensive documentation. However, we require strategic alliance before proceeding. Independently, we lack sufficient protective infrastructure. I've identified a potentially receptive starting point for establishing necessary protection, I confirmed. The Manhattan District Attorney's Office, operated from an imposing judicial building in Lower Manhattan. I had secured an appointment under deliberately vague pretenses, recognizing that explicitly mentioning the Stenton name would trigger immediate institutional resistance through their extensive influence networks. Assistant District Attorney Lauren Hayes greeted me with professional formality. a perceptive woman in her 40s demonstrating the direct analytical demeanor that characterized effective prosecutors. "Mr. Carter," she began, gesturing toward the chair opposite her desk, "you mentioned possessing information regarding investment fraud targeting economically vulnerable communities." "That's correct," I confirmed, placing a comprehensive documentation folder before her. However, I wasn't entirely forthcoming regarding the scope or the specific perpetrators involved. Her expression registered professional interest. "Please elaborate." "This evidence concerns systematic improprieties within the Stenton Foundation, and by extension, Senator William Stenton and his daughter Olivia Stenton. To her considerable credit, she didn't immediately terminate our meeting despite the political sensitivity involved. She opened the folder and began methodically reviewing the documents, maintaining professional neutrality throughout her examination. "These represent exceptionally serious allegations against extremely influential individuals, Mr. Carter," she observed after completing her initial review. "What specific connection do you maintain with the Stenton family?" "I was married to Olivia Stenton until 9 months ago," I explained straightforwardly. "During that relationship, I observed concerning operational patterns within the Foundation's activities, but was systematically excluded from accessing specific documentation. Following our separation, I received these comprehensive records from a credible source. Through what specific channels did you receive this sensitive documentation?" she inquired with professional skepticism. I had anticipated this critical question. Clara Miller provided these records directly. She served as executive assistant to the Stentons for 11 years with comprehensive access. She attempted reporting these irregularities through designated compliance channels and experienced immediate termination and professional blacklisting as direct consequence. Hayes tapped her pen thoughtfully against the desk surface. "You understand the Stentons maintain extraordinary political and financial influence throughout multiple jurisdictions." "Completely. And you recognize that publicly challenging their operations potentially exposes you to substantial personal and professional repercussions." "I'm already experiencing those consequences," I confirmed. "They're currently pursuing litigation against my company seeking $50 million in damages." She nodded with measured acknowledgement. "What specific outcome are you seeking from this office, Mr. Carter?" "Legitimate accountability," I responded without hesitation. "These documents conclusively demonstrate that the Stenton Foundation has systematically misappropriated over $300 million, specifically designated for financial education centers in underserved communities. Those resources were instead diverted toward market manipulation activities and advancement of Senator Stenton's private business interests." She closed the folder with deliberate care. "I'll review this evidence thoroughly and consult with appropriate colleagues regarding potential jurisdiction. I make no commitments regarding potential action, Mr. Carter. An investigation of this magnitude would require substantial institutional resources and significant political determination. I understand the complexities involved," I acknowledged while standing. "Someone recently reminded me that justice ultimately matters more than institutional power. I'm hopeful your office maintains similar perspective." As I departed, I recognized the uncertainty regarding whether Hayes would pursue meaningful action or if Stenton influence would once again suppress legitimate accountability. But for the first time, their systematic improprieties had been formally documented with someone possessing actual enforcement authority. 3 days later, we received modified legal documents from Stenton Financial. The monetary damages sought had been reduced from $50 million to $10 million, and several substantive allegations had been withdrawn entirely. They proposed settlement. Ironcore would issue a technical clarification of our analysis rather than formal retraction and pay nominal compensation of $100,000. "They're implementing strategic retreat," Clara observed with surprise. "What specifically prompted this reversal?" "They're concerned about additional documentation we potentially possess," I explained, "and which other authorities might have received similar evidence." I hadn't informed Clara about my meeting with the district attorney, avoiding creating potentially of false expectations. However, the timing correlation seemed particularly significant. We formally rejected their settlement proposal without counteroffer. 2 days afterward, I received a direct message from Olivia. "Dinner meeting required. The Harrison 8 p.m. tonight. Come alone." The Harrison represented an exclusive restaurant in Tribeca where we'd frequently dined during our marriage. Neutral territory, but firmly within her established social environment. I deliberated ignoring her demand entirely, but professional curiosity regarding her unexpected approach prevailed. I arrived at 8:15, deliberately establishing subtle dominance through minor tardiness, wearing a simple but meticulously tailored suit purchased with Ironcore's initial profits. A small personal indulgence, but psychologically significant. Olivia waited at a discreet corner table, a wine glass already half emptied before her. She glanced upward as I approached, her expression carefully controlled, yet revealing unfamiliar tension. "You're deliberately late," she observed critically. "I'm here nevertheless," I countered, taking the seat opposite her. "What specific purpose necessitated this meeting, Olivia?" She studied me with clinical assessment. "You've undergone noticeable transformation." "Circumstances necessitated adaptation," I acknowledged. "The changes don't complement your natural temperament," she stated, though without conviction behind the criticism. A server approached our table. I ordered sparkling water without alcohol, requiring complete mental clarity for whatever strategic game Olivia was orchestrating. "Our legal representatives inform me you've rejected our extraordinarily generous settlement proposal," she began once the server departed. It wasn't remotely generous. It reflected desperation poorly disguised as magnanimity. Her eyes narrowed dangerously. "Exercise caution, Evan. You're overestimating your strategic position." "Am I genuinely?" "Then explain why this conversation became necessary from your perspective." She consumed another calculated sip of wine. "Because despite everything that's transpired between us, I genuinely don't wish to witness your complete destruction. We maintained marriage for 6 years. That relationship deserves some consideration." I nearly laughed aloud at her transparent manipulation. "When have you ever valued anything beyond power acquisition and financial domination?" "That characterization is fundamentally unfair," she protested without genuine emotion. "I maintain legitimate concern for your well-being." "You maintain me as another acquisition," I corrected without animosity. "Like an expensive handbag or decorative artwork. Something to display advantageously for social approval." Authentic hurt briefly crossed her expression, disappearing almost immediately beneath practiced control. "Is that genuinely your perception of our relationship?" "It represents confirmed understanding based on extensive evidence," I replied, "but that belongs to the past." "Why have you arranged this meeting, Olivia?" She deliberately placed her wine glass down with excessive precision. "My father has expressed concern regarding unusual inquiries originating from the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, specifically detailed questions concerning the Foundation's community center implementations. Would you possibly have relevant information regarding this development?" So that explained everything. Hayes was actually investigating despite Stenton influence. "Should I possess such information?" I inquired with deliberate ambiguity. "Don't implement childish evasion tactics," she snapped with uncharacteristic emotional display. "We understand you've been contacting various individuals. Former employees, regulatory connections." I neither confirmed nor denied her accusations. "Truth eventually emerges regardless of suppression efforts, Olivia." "Truth," she repeated with evident bitterness. "Do you comprehend actual truth? My father has contributed millions toward legitimate causes that benefit disadvantaged communities. Has he simultaneously benefited? Certainly. Show me any philanthropist who hasn't pursued combined interests. But the positive impact fundamentally outweighs minor procedural irregularities. Explain that perspective to communities promised educational resources that never materialized despite public announcements," I challenged quietly. She dismissed the concern with a practiced gesture. "Implementation plans evolve. Strategic priorities shift. Such adjustments hardly constitute criminal behavior. Financial fraud represents criminal behavior. Misappropriation of designated charitable funds represents criminal behavior. Systematic market manipulation represents criminal behavior." Olivia's expression hardened perceptibly. "Exercise extreme caution regarding your implications." "I'm not implying anything through ambiguity. I'm stating verifiable facts supported by comprehensive documentation." I leaned forward with calm intensity. The litigation against Ironcore must be withdrawn completely. Furthermore, Stent Invest must address the specific issues identified in our published analysis. Or what specific consequences will follow? She challenged with residual arrogance. Everything I've accumulated becomes public knowledge, not exclusively through the district attorney's office, through every financial publication, every news organization, every regulatory agency, simultaneously implemented without warning. Her laughter conveyed calculated dismissal. You would face overwhelming legal consequences. Your professional career in financial services would terminate permanently. Most probably, I agreed without hesitation. But your father would spend his remaining years in federal custody, and the Stenton name would become permanently associated with financial corruption rather than philanthropic contribution. Consider that legacy carefully. The server returned briefly. We maintained tense silence until privacy resumed. What do you actually want from this situation, Evan? Olivia asked, her voice lowered significantly. Financial compensation? Executive position within Stenton Financial? Simply name your requirements. I stood decisively. That exemplifies your fundamental limitation, Olivia. You assume everyone maintains your transactional perspective because you've consistently operated through financial manipulation. I placed my unused napkin deliberately on the table. I want legitimate accountability, and I'll achieve that outcome with or without your cooperation. As I walked toward the exit, she called after me, "This situation remains unresolved." I turned briefly. You're absolutely correct. Resolution approaches rapidly, and nothing within your considerable resources can prevent the inevitable consequences. The following morning, financial news exploded with unprecedented developments. Federal agents had executed search warrants at Stenton Foundation offices, removing extensive documentation. Senator William Stenton had been escorted to federal offices for formal questioning. Trading in Stenton Financial Group shares had been temporarily suspended, pending regulatory review. Clara entered my office breathlessly, her expression combining excitement with disbelief. They actually implemented enforcement action against the Stentons. How did this possibly happen without advance warning? She studied my composed reaction carefully. You anticipated this development. You facilitated this outcome. Through which specific channels? I provided comprehensive information to individuals with appropriate authority, I explained. Their subsequent actions represented independent professional judgment. What happens with their litigation against us now? It becomes entirely irrelevant compared to their federal regulatory challenges. My phone indicated an incoming message from an unrecognized number. Immediate consultation required. L.H. Lauren Hayes, the Assistant District Attorney. I excused myself and returned her call immediately. This investigation wasn't supposed to become public knowledge prematurely, she stated without preamble when answering. I had absolutely no involvement in any disclosure, I assured her genuinely. I've shared this information exclusively with your office. She remained silent momentarily. Information leakage occurred. Someone alerted a journalist prematurely. Now this entire investigation potentially faces compromise accusations. The Stentons' attorneys are already claiming political persecution without foundation. How can I provide additional assistance? Come to our offices immediately. Bring Miss Miller. We require formal documented statements, everything properly recorded through official channels, and any additional evidence not previously disclosed. Substantial additional documentation exists, I confirmed. Will arrive within 1 hour. As I concluded the call, my email notification indicated a message from Olivia. No accompanying text, just an attachment, a photograph from earlier in our relationship, capturing a beachside moment with both of us laughing naturally. Before manipulation became evident, before I recognized my role as her social project, a deliberate reminder of what had initially seemed genuine connection or had effectively simulated authentic emotion. I deleted it without responding to her transparent manipulation attempt. The Stenton scandal dominated news coverage for 3 consecutive weeks. Senator William Stenton resigned from his committee appointments under mounting pressure. Stenton Financial Group's stock valuation declined by 40% despite trading circuit breakers. Stenton Invest operations were quietly discontinued without formal announcement. Clara and I devoted countless hours assisting prosecutors, methodically explaining the complex financial mechanisms that had enabled the Stentons to operate their scheme without detection for years through regulatory gaps. Throughout this period, Iron Core experienced accelerated growth. Our public stance against one of the most politically connected financial dynasties established our reputation for uncompromising integrity within the industry. New clients specifically sought our services because we had challenged established corruption despite overwhelming odds. We relocated to expanded offices in downtown Brooklyn, increased staffing substantially, and diversified service offerings based on market demand. We evolved beyond analyzing competing investment platforms, creating our own legitimate alternative built on principles of authentic transparency and accountability to clients rather than shareholders. One evening, as I worked late finalizing documentation for a new service offering, an unexpected knock interrupted my concentration. I looked up to discover Olivia standing in my doorway, a diminished version of her former commanding presence. Her designer clothing had been replaced by modest business attire. The imperious confidence had vanished from her posture completely. "Your security protocols require significant enhancement," she observed without greeting. "I accessed your executive floor without any verification. We operate with transparent practices rather than defensive secrecy," I replied, gesturing toward a visitor chair. "What brings you here, Olivia?" She remained standing, maintaining physical distance. "My father is negotiating a plea arrangement with federal prosecutors. Our family reputation lies in ruins across multiple jurisdictions. Federal authorities are seizing our Hampton estate through asset forfeiture. My mother has ceased all communication with me indefinitely." She laughed bitterly without humor. "Throughout this catastrophe, I've repeatedly remembered that you actually warned me about potential consequences years ago." "When specifically did I provide such warning?" "During our second year of marriage. You expressed concern that foundation accounting practices appeared potentially problematic. I instructed you to focus on your limited responsibilities instead." She finally seated herself, her shoulders demonstrating unusual vulnerability. "You were attempting to protect me from exactly this outcome, weren't you?" I considered her revisionist interpretation carefully. "I was attempting to protect both our futures. You chose to disregard legitimate concerns. I consistently disregarded your perspective," she acknowledged with unprecedented honesty. "Throughout our entire relationship, I never recognized your actual capabilities." She surveyed my office, noting the understated but professional furnishings, the impressive view of Brooklyn Bridge through floor-to-ceiling windows. "You've established something significant without any assistance from my connections. Entirely contrary to my predictions." "Yes, I have. I genuinely believe such achievement impossible without Stenton resources," she admitted quietly. "I believed everyone operated within my limited worldview, either possessing power or serving those who controlled access to opportunity. That represents an extraordinarily isolated perspective." Her smile conveyed genuine sadness. "I'm experiencing that reality with painful clarity currently." Silence expanded between us, filled with unspoken acknowledgement of what might have developed differently if we had approached our relationship as authentic partners rather than transactional participants. "I require employment, Evan," she stated directly. "No legitimate organization will hire anyone bearing the Stenton name. My financial accounts remain frozen indefinitely. My supposed friends have disappeared completely." I studied her with careful assessment, evaluating potential manipulation. "You're being completely serious about this request?" "Absolutely serious. I possess valuable skills and industry knowledge. I understand financial structures comprehensively. I know where problematic practices remain hidden throughout the industry." She maintained direct eye contact. "I could provide substantial value to Iron Core's continued development. Why would I possibly trust your involvement after everything that's transpired between us?" "Because I have nothing whatsoever remaining to leverage against anyone," she stated with simple honesty. "And because despite everything I've done to undermine you, you fundamentally believe in second opportunities and redemptive possibilities. That represents both your greatest strength and significant vulnerability." I stood and approached the window, contemplating the implications carefully. Bringing Olivia into Ironcore would introduce unpredictable variables into our carefully constructed organization. And yet, her detailed understanding of elite financial operations remained unparalleled despite her downfall. Her connections, even substantially diminished, exceeded our current network. And there existed undeniable poetic justice in the woman who had declared, "I couldn't survive without her support," now requesting my professional salvation. I turned back toward her, decision crystallized. "Your request for employment is declined." Her expression registered genuine shock at rejection. "Evan, please reconsider. I understand I've behaved terribly toward you, but I've learned valuable—" "This isn't about personal revenge," I interrupted calmly. "This represents business judgment. Your presence within Ironcore would fundamentally undermine everything we've built. Our reputation for transparency and accountability cannot accommodate someone who systematically violated both principles throughout their entire career." "I can change my approach completely," she insisted with desperation entering her voice. "I can contribute significant value to your organization. I understand industry operations better than anyone. You understand exploitation and manipulation," I corrected without cruelty, but without compromise. "Those skills directly contradict our fundamental mission. I'm genuinely sorry for your current circumstances, but Ironcore cannot provide your redemption narrative." Tears formed in her eyes, something I had never witnessed during our entire marriage. "What am I supposed to do now? Where can I possibly go from here?" I approached her with compassionate respect but maintained professional boundaries. "That represents your journey to discover independently, Olivia. Perhaps start by making genuine amends to everyone harmed by Stenton operations over the years. The community's promised resources that never materialized. The employees terminated for questioning unethical practices. The competitors systematically undermined through market manipulation." "So many apologies," she whispered, looking utterly lost for the first time in her privileged existence. "Yes," I agreed without satisfaction in her suffering. "Accountability involves facing consequences beyond legal penalties." She stood shakily, composure completely abandoned. "I should leave now." "That would be appropriate," I confirmed gently. As she reached the doorway, she turned back with vulnerability I'd never witnessed before. "Why are you succeeding where I failed so completely, Evan? After everything I did to diminish you, how have you managed to build something genuinely meaningful while everything I inherited has collapsed?" I considered her question with genuine reflection. Because I built Ironcore on serving others rather than exploiting them. Because I valued integrity above convenience. Because I recognized that sustainable success requires mutual benefit rather than zero-sum competition. She nodded slowly, accepting this fundamental truth. "Goodbye, Evan. Goodbye, Olivia." As she walked away, shoulders bent with the weight of consequences, I experienced no vindication in her suffering. Only recognition that justice sometimes arrives through unexpected channels, and that rebuilding requires dismantling flawed foundations first. 1 year later, I stood on the rooftop terrace of Ironcore's new headquarters, a renovated historic building in Brooklyn's vibrant Dumbo neighborhood, with panoramic views of Manhattan across the East River. The evening breeze rustled through my shirt as I watched sunset transform the skyline into brilliant gold against deepening blue. Behind me, our expansive rooftop gathering space hosted a celebration for our team, now exceeding 50 dedicated professionals, marking the launch of our most significant initiative yet, the Ironcore Foundation, dedicated to bringing legitimate financial education and resources to underserved communities. The very communities the Stentons had promised to assist before betraying that commitment. Clara approached, carrying 2 champagne flutes. She handed one to me with quiet pride. "Remarkable view from this perspective," she observed. "Remarkable transformation over these months," I acknowledged, gently touching my glass against hers in celebration. She gestured discreetly toward the gathering. "Your parents have arrived to witness your achievement." I turned to observe my mother and father entering the rooftop space, looking around with undisguised amazement at what their son had created from nothing but determination and ethical principles. My father caught sight of me and raised his hand in greeting, pride evident in his bearing. After years believing himself a failure for losing his business during economic collapse, he now served as valued advisor to our community outreach programs, applying practical knowledge to ensure our financial education serve genuine community needs rather than institutional metrics. Please excuse me, I requested. Family obligations deserve attention. Absolutely, Clara agreed. I'll maintain operational oversight here. As I crossed toward my parents, I passed the location where Olivia had stood during our final conversation. According to financial news reports, she had relocated to Europe, working with smaller financial literacy organizations there, applying her knowledge toward genuine community benefit rather than personal advancement. Perhaps genuine redemption remained possible after all, through different paths than expected. My mother embraced me warmly. "We're enormously proud of everything you've accomplished," she whispered emotionally. My father's handshake transformed into an unexpected bear hug. "Iron Core," he stated simply, referencing our family mantra. "Iron Core," I confirmed with deep appreciation for his unwavering belief despite circumstances.